How do we sequester more carbon into our soils, and how can we do it the most effectively? I'm Rob from Dowdle Family Farms, and in this video we're going to talk about how we sequester more carbon into our soils from the bottom up. Now, sequestering carbon by placing mulches and compost on top of our soils is a very common practice, and there are adequate ways of accomplishing that. In fact, I'm in a pasture now, and these cows behind me and walking around are applying manure and urea to the pasture from the top down. However, we can sequester a lot more carbon, and in many ways it's a more stable form of carbon if we sequester it from the bottom up. Most of the time when people talk about forages for livestock, or when they talk about cover crops, we talk about dry matter per acre. And usually what they're talking about is the amount of biomass above the ground once it's cut and then dried, and how much that averages out to the acre. The problem with that measurement, though, is that it ignores the roots. And when we're trying to sequester more carbon into our soils, it is all about the roots. I think it was Jim Horman who said that 80% of the organic matter, or the carbon content of our soil, is contributed through roots. Roots play a tremendous role in sequestering the carbon. There are two ways that plant roots contribute to building organic matter in our soils. One of those is through root exudates. Root exudates are the product of plants growing using photosynthesis to convert sunlight, carbon dioxide into energy. And a good portion of that energy is stored in the roots, but also a good portion of that energy is actually exuded through the roots into the soil. As the soil life begins to feed on that, they poop it out, they die, they reproduce, many other things happen. But the short of a long story is the plant is able to harvest many minerals that they need from the soil life. However, much like many other forms of organic matter, those root exudates and the soil life that it grows releases a good portion of those carbons back into the atmosphere, just like people or livestock eat and exhale carbon dioxide and inhale oxygen. Soil life often does a very similar thing. However, when the plants die, they leave in the roots a lot of carbon into the soil that tends to be a more stable form of soil organic carbon. Forgive me, this is a farmer's perspective on root cycles, but when plants grow, many of the finer roots are the roots that contribute most of the nutrients and water to the plants that they need. Those finer roots have a particular life cycle. It may be a few weeks or months or years, depending on the type of plant that it is. However, as those roots begin to get brittle and they're not as effective, they slough off or they die. And as a result, they leave carbon into the soil for the soil life to consume. The plant then grows more roots, and that cycle continues. So roots add a lot of organic matter to the soil in their physical form. Now let's break this down into different types of annual and perennial plants. Annual plants are plants that grow, they produce a seed, the plant dies over winter, and then a new plant grows from that seed. Think of soybeans, corn, sorghum, sudan grass, buckwheat, lettuce. Many things are annual plants. So when those plants die, even if they only have one cycle of root, what happens is those roots that are growing then die, begin to break down, and they contribute to more organic matter. Then you have more perennial plants like this fescue and this grass behind me, and they follow a very similar pattern. Even though the plant itself does not die, many of the roots do die. My point here is that annual and perennial grasses and pastures do contribute to building soil organic matter because of the organic matter that is in the roots of the plant themselves, not just the material that's on top of the soil. I'm more familiar with sorghum sudan grass, so let's use it as an example. It's an annual, and so when we plant it, we have to plant the seed every year. If we let it grow up to about 3 feet tall and then graze it down to about 12 inches high, it will produce 5 to 10 times the root mass than if we were to just let it grow on its own and never graze it or bush hog it. I've seen this myself when we did not graze it this past year because of drought. On top of that, once sorghum Sudan grass is either mown or grazed, the roots penetrate much deeper into the soil profile, down 4 or even 6 feet deep. So once those roots die, they're contributing to the organic matter not just on top of the soil, but much, much deeper into the soil profile. As a result of that, if sorghum Sudan grass is managed effectively, it can produce not just a lot more biomass on top of the soil for livestock to eat, but even underneath the soil profile for soil life, and it'll increase the soil organic matter. It is just amazing how effective sorghum Sudan grass can be in improving soil life and sequestering more carbon into our soils. For now, what's important to understand about managing grasses and pastures is that if we do this effectively, we can increase the soil organic matter, not just in the top 5 or 6 inches of our soil, but so much deeper into the soil profile. And when you can add 5 to 10 times the amount of root mass that becomes a relatively stable soil carbon, it makes a huge difference in how much carbon is sequestered into our soils. A diversity of species is also important for sequestering more carbon deeper into our soil profiles. I've already talked about sorghum Sudan grass and how deep and how massive those roots can be. However, if you consider something like buckwheat, its root profile is just in the top 10 or 12 inches of the soil, but it has a different type of root and it performs a very different function, but it still sequesters more carbon into the soil through roots in a very different way. It also cycles much, much more quickly in 30 days or so. But if we're managing our pastures, having a pasture of just grass isn't always the best. Having something like dandelion or dock or plantain also contributes to building soil life and making it more productive, but it also has different root profiles that perform different functions in the soil, and they help sequester more carbon in the roots from the bottom up. So learning how to manage the forages we're growing, having a diversity of species, both of those strategies make a huge difference in how we can sequester more carbon into our soils. We'll have more detailed videos later on these different strategies, but I'm curious for you, how do you sequester more carbon into your soils from the bottom up through the roots or through the different things that you're growing? If you like this video, it'd help me a whole lot if you'd share it with people you think might be interested. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and make sure you get the notifications by clicking on that bell icon. Until next time, it's Rob from Dowdle Family Farms wishing you the best. Stay tuned for more videos on how we can sequester more carbon in our soils.